Hello and welcome to ArtShow. I'm Craig Stover, and today I have with me John Howell White. Hi, John. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
Very good. I wanted to start right away and share some work of yours with our viewers.
Ah,
So, went on your site and selected a few pieces, things I might have questions about.
uh-huh.
So, I wanted to start with this one. This is a very dynamic painting. And I have a feeling there's a story behind this one that I'm not getting. But with the roots and those bigger shapes. Can you tell me a little bit about this picture?
Oh my God, this is oldie but goodie,
Yeah.
challenging my memory here. So this was, I think it's probably the only one you'll have that was part of this series. Um, Generally, I'm a process painter, and
Okay.
consequently, how I begin a painting has a lot to do with how it ends up looking. And these paintings were constructed out of a line drawing that you see these loops that look kind of like cells
Hmm.
that originally started with these rows of these almost phonic notations along the running horizontally. And over the course of time, various paintings became different things. And in this one, the uh, shapes, the sort of rounded shapes took precedent. And I was thinking about biology, but I was also thinking about um, that that line work made me think of both language and notations for language and phonics and
Okay.
musical notations, but that kind of went into this, in this particular work, went into this kind of rhythmic, bioformy kind of painting that was just I guess, just sort of a celebration. It's fairly large.
Hmm.
Um, and then the last part, the um, uh, the, when I was doing this work, I was also thinking a lot about ghosts and these sort of ghost presences. And so
Interesting.
that large form, kind of bean-like form that
Yep.
is,
Yeah.
that was this kind of hovering ghost-like figure that
Right.
I I actually picked up from looking at Sargent paintings and being although right, looking at Sargent paintings looks nothing like a Sargent painting, but
No,
uh,
I got it.
looking at Sargent paintings, I love that sort of imposing, impenetrable figure that is so characteristic of his portraiture. But I wanted it to be this sort of ghost form that is both imposing in terms of its size, but then unimposing in terms of its penetrability. So yeah,
I was
yeah,
fascinated by this not only because I I see these sort of little biomorphic forms and they have root structures, and I thought it was fascinating that you repeated them, but they're all different. They're not exactly the same. But it was that larger loop that really drew me in because I noticed that you go over and under in some of those, implying sort of dimensionality between it. And I was wondering,
yeah.
just kind of wondering about that. It was
I wanted
an
that to
interesting choice.
I wanted that to interrupt. Oh, and then the other thing about the root form was I have this little painting that I did of a beet,
Mm,
and I've always been fascinated by that space, like in a beet, where it goes, that point where it goes from where beet cells decide to become either roots or leaves, right?
mm.
And so there's some place like right in the middle. And I'm fascinated by that space, that in-between space that we all kind of put ourselves in and sort of luxuriate in. And
Well,
so,
speaking of in between space,
Ah,
This one, I wanted to show this because I thought this was a stunner, just in terms of the variety of mark making and just sort of the rhythm of this picture. So this is much more current, correct?
much more current. Um, this painting, which you probably don't, I think the name of this painting is Beauty, that you're probably not, can't see immediately, but like I said, with the first painting, all of my work is dependent upon how it begins.
Mm-hmm.
And at the top of this painting, about maybe a tenth of the way down, there is some letter work that is very difficult to pick out, but it says in sort of block letters, Beauty.
Okay.
And
Are you putting that in to hide it, or is that for just for your own knowledge that it's there?
I put it in because originally I had a large canvas. It was the largest canvas I'd done in a while. And I said to myself, this looks like a dare.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, oh, well, I think I'll put the word dare on this canvas, because if that word is in my head, there's a way that it's not going to be influencing the development of the painting. So
I'm getting a sense that there's a lot of process-driven work in this
it's all
particular.
process-driven work.
And that's the kind of thing that when I first saw this, I started to immediately think of Clifford Still and his sort of process, especially with some of those bigger, uh, bulkier shapes that you've got going on. But then you can do something like this, which is still process, but it comes off as completely different. You know, you have these sort of Ross Bleckner textures on either side, but the center looks like the middle of an early Monet painting. This
Yeah.
looks like it was a lot of fun to paint, was it?
This was a lot of fun to paint, and it's a big painting. It's like 72 inches tall, and I can't remember how long wide, but fairly wide, like 114 or so. Um, yeah, I love I work big and small. I like what can I tell you about this? Oh my God.
This looks like a picture that just needs to be experienced. Like I need to be in the room with this in order to see it.
Yeah, uh I was doing some reading at the time about contemplation and the contemplative life versus the active life. And so I was thinking of the efficacy of contemplation. And I said that to somebody once, and they said, well, I said, you know, the pieces are about contemplation. And the person said to me, contemplating what? No.
It is contemplation, right?
Right.
I get you.
It's process.
Well, speaking of process, I wanted to, I'm sorry to go through, but there's certain pictures I really wanted to show. So this one was actually the first picture that I select. And so my immediate question is how are you actually, this is kind of geeky, how are you applying the paint? Are you using a knife, brush, or you got something else that's working for you?
I've been transitioning from brush to knife.
Okay.
I've been working more and more with knife, and this one looks like I got to get really close to it to see it, because my memory isn't that great. It looks like there's a fairly good combination of both of these in both of them
In this particular one, I really enjoy the variety of the mark making. So I asked about the knife because it doesn't look like a brushstroke to me. Although beneath it, I was curious also about if you are using any sort of thinning agents or mediums with your oil paint, because I see some distress in the paint, and I was wondering, do you do a combination, or do you always have a thinner?
Great question. I don't use any glazes normally, and I
Right.
don't use any mediums. I just use solvent and paint.
So you are thinning the paint a little bit
I'm thinning the paint when I start. So
to
the
get like that, to get like this kind of mark making. That makes me think about sort of thinning.
Yeah, so they start out with I started out with this series with and actually the last piece that you saw. If you go
Hmm.
back to the last piece, can you do that?
Sure.
And go, can you go in on it?
Not very much. It gets a little fuzzed.
Oh, wait. Okay, so these paintings are started with vertical lines. They're all started with vertical lines that are drawn at that create a framework. You can see it mostly on the way on the left over there.
Hmm. Hmm.
Actually sits as an undergrid for the whole painting.
Hmm.
So I put this vertical line structure down, and that works as a scaffolding
Hmm.
for the various marks to hang off of. So I don't really actually, I'm sort of compulsive in this that I actually, the first coat of paint is gesso that I color to be the same color as the canvas.
Okay. All right.
And then I do drawings, these kind of vertical line drawings, and then I do some, because the vertical line drawings are done with Conte,
Mm.
then I just do some I just use solvent and start play, almost actually drawing, but with a brush, but it's the Conte that's on the paint that then gets spread about in different.
Okay.
And so that provides the foundation for what I would then call painting.
Are you using that same process for a majority of your works?
Uh, for um, for the last one that you went by,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
I do some sort of variation. These paintings,
Yeah. I had to get to this one. Sorry. It was going a little quick. So this is on paper, correct?
this is on paper.
And are you preparing your papers?
I use a Legion water oil painting paper,
Okay.
and so to understand this painting, can you go back to see me for a second?
Oh, sorry. This one?
No, to me. Can you get it so the you go out of the,
Oh, sure.
yeah,
Like this?
yeah.
Okay.
So
Oh,
my
I see.
see, my studio is, I have a kind of a metal rail that runs around here.
Okay.
And I started out with these 36 by 36 inch canvases that kind of fit into the rail.
Hmm.
And
Nice
those,
system. Hmm.
that's the system. I originally made 36 by 36 inch canvases, and then I started putting them together with smaller ones. And then over here, you can see on that wall,
Mm-hmm.
those are the ones that you're talking about. So you can go back to the piece now that you've got that in your head. And
Okay. So do you, with these paper pieces, do you back them up? How do people show them? I mean, you can't frame this, right? It's a
no,
framer's nightmare.
I'm still thinking about it.
Okay. Well, again, I chose this one in particular because you have quite a few of these. I was really sort of torn as to which one, but I love this one because of the way you're handling the paint. And it reminded me of the early work of Sam Francis, when he
Oh,
had
yeah, yeah, yeah.
those
Yeah.
lumpy forms and they just kind of sit there, but they interact with each other really well. I thought that was fantastic. I don't know, do you pick up like clues from other artists, like, ooh,
Oh,
that's a great way to make a mark, and then you use it, or are you just inventing?
um, Yeah, I look at art all the time.
Okay.
You know, I look at all kinds of um, painters. You know, I'm fascinated by how somebody like Velázquez, you know, on one hand, you know, the face is painted in a smooth surface, and then the cuff of the dress is all lumpy. I mean, it's
It
just,
does that woo thing.
yeah, it's so great. And but that's what I get you know, a kick out of
Yeah,
in.
I can see that in your work. So, I have a bunch of questions I need to ask you. First, I want to ask about your start as an artist. You know, at what point in your life did you know that you were going to become an artist?
Assuming that I have become an artist.
You're right. I think it's official. I'll write a note. You're an artist.
Okay. Okay. Um, I mean, I'm clearly a painter. I'm not sure the other. Um, uh, I had like absolutely no artistic talent. So I was so I'm a product of education, nurture rather than nature.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't start, I mean, I literally was the kid in fifth grade that they only let touch, put the blue in the sky, the background, the mural, you
Okay.
know?
Little did they know.
Yeah.
So
Um,
who taught you these processes then? How did you learn? Or you just
so
self-taught?
So I picked up painting when I was in undergraduate school and
Okay.
fell in love with it. And the reason I picked up painting, not because I ever expected to be um, you know, make a living at it, but it just seemed like I have a sort of a philosophical bent, and it seemed like I was studying chemistry at the time, and that didn't seem to be a large enough container to be able to accommodate the various ways that I thought. But
Hmm.
painting seemed to be, oh, I think this could keep me occupied for the rest of my life.
Yeah,
And
I could see that. You know, it's funny you said you were doing chemists. Most of the chemists that I knew who became artists all became printmakers because
oh
of the
yeah,
acids that they're used to working with. So I know. Have you ever done any printmaking?
I have. I'm not interested in that. I'm more of a scratch cook than I
Like a
am a
direct,
baker.
yeah.
You know,
Uh-huh.
and printmakers, I think, are bakers
Yeah. I
in
get
general.
I get what you mean. Do you keep a sketchbook or do you just go?
I used to
Okay.
do sketchbooks. I used to have um, you know, a habit where every morning I would do sketching, and I would, but the sketching was not drawings of things.
Right, right.
They were sketches of what I do. So I would do sketches and I would do poems. And so I
Okay.
this kind of sketch poetry thing. I don't do that anymore. I just paint. I
Mm-hmm.
just pretty much just
Sketchbooks up here.
the sketchbook's up here, and although I do find the line work um, um, delicate and fascinating,
Mm-hmm.
it's the materiality of the paint that really I realized, you know, you got to come down to what it is that you're
Yeah.
really invested in. And
When you're in your studio and you're going to make something new, do you have a go-to thing that sort of sparks your creativity? I'll give you an example. I have artists that'll tell me, well, I need to go for a walk. Somebody else will say, no, for me, it's literature or it's, discovering nature in my backyard. So is there something that you know that's going to work for you?
you know, I I read a reasonable amount,
Okay.
and when I'm working on, I tend to work on group. I work on the whole room at the same time. I'm working the room at the same. I was a teacher.
Okay. All right. Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm always working the room, and they all finish at the same time. It's done when they're done.
Good for you.
School's out, you know, vacation. Um, let's see. So your question was
What sparks your creativity?
what
What,
sparks
what,
my creativity? So I do, if you look behind me, you see these words up above there. So I put words that come out of the readings that I'm doing um,
okay.
as these little poetic phrases, and then I attach them on the paintings as titles. And so that sort of sparks it, but you know, the bottom line is it doesn't get, I don't like making decisions.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Like
it sounds like you've set up a system, like a practice that, you know, all the paintings are going to end up differently, but you have a way of making something.
that's right. I have an arena. I have an
Right.
arena.
Okay. That's it. That's the word I was looking for. Arena.
Right. I have the
So,
arena.
well, let me ask you this though. Oftentimes artists, when they're going to make a work of art, they create rules for themselves, whether they're conscious of it or not. You know, I'm going to use these colors. I'm going to, you know, this big. Have you ever found yourself in the middle of a painting and all of a sudden you're just like, you just change all the rules in the middle of the painting?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Does
And,
that work?
that painting behind me,
Okay.
that looked a lot different about
Okay.
48 hours ago.
All right. Yeah. And it was satisfying to change it, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, I mean, it was a cliche, right? It was a kind of kitsch, and I had to get rid of the kitsch.
Yeah.
I did want to say one thing about the painting that you showed me, the one that you said was it, who was the reference that you,
I mentioned Clifford Still.
West Coast artist, no,
Sam Francis.
Sam Francis, right.
Yeah.
That started with a 10-inch line of paper that went all the way around the room.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I did that because I was going out to a residency in Wyoming,
mm-hmm.
and I knew I couldn't take these big canvases out there. So I did this 10-inch line of paper. And then this is how these the paper paintings that are oddly shaped that you said, how are you going to show these things? This is how they started as this 10-inch line. And then because I'm such a process painter, I went, oh no, I gotta put paper on top of the paper because there's not enough movement in here. And
yeah. That process reminds me of when I see old master paintings and there's clearly a seam because they needed to add a whole section, you know, like a Rubens will do that or something. So I totally get the process. So you've been making artwork for a while. Have you noticed over the years that your creative process has changed? And if so, how has your process changed?
Well, I'm 74 and I started painting when I was 20 years old.
Oh, spring chicken. Okay, I got it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I've gone through, mostly I've worked non-objectively. I went through a period when I was doing these sort of illustrative to see things of kind of figures moving through space that were interacting with each other. That started out as line drawings, so they were very kind of, you know, graphic. And at some point I decided I don't really care about making figures that are talking to other figures, you know.
Was the changes in your work, were they gradual changes that ended up with what you're doing, or were there ever times when there's just been huge breaks?
There was a huge break. I just said, I can't do this anymore. And
okay. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious. I want to ask you, you know, we're getting close on time here, but I want to make sure to ask this one question, especially like with the works that are like behind you and the fact that you talked about the works being not complimentary. What was the word that you used?
I don't know, but it was probably
anyway,
it's probably a good one.
It was a good one, right? When you're working, where's your mindset? Are you like completely are you zoned in or are you completely zoned out?
Oh, there's a good question. It relates to your other question about your inspiration. Because I didn't quite finish my thought on that.
Okay.
I say, you know, painting is like everything else, you know, I mean, for me, painting is like everything else. It's like this, it's set, that it can take you to this other place that other things can't take. So all the other processes, you know, making lists, organizing yourself, you know, thinking about where you're going on summer vacation, you know, all those thoughts are in, you know, kind of in there. But there is a place where it's up to my conversation, my allowing the paint to intercede and for me to listen to what's going on. I've been thinking lately that it's much less about knowing what you're doing as opposed to watching what's going on and validating it, and recognizing it as it occurs. And so
that's perfect. That's perfect. Time for one last question. If you've watched the show at all, you know what's coming. What does making art do for you?
What does making art do for me? Okay. You mean like one thing?
Could be whatever you want.
It gives me an arena to access ideas and organize my thoughts in ways that nothing else works for me. It's just the thing that works for me. And I get to be here, and I'm so privileged. I get to be here surrounded by this stuff. It's kind of tyrannical because then I go out in the world and say, you know, how come you're not like my student? You know, I mean, it's very narcissistic. But we try to fight that.
Yeah. See, you were able to answer that very well, actually. So, so obviously, this was a wonderful conversation. It went by super quick. That always means to me it's always really interesting. Now I have more questions for you. So maybe in a year or so, we'll do a part 2. But John, I really wanted to thank you for coming by and talking with me today about your work. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I want to thank everybody who tuned into ArtShow today. We love your support. Please like and subscribe. And if you have questions, please put them in the comments section. If we can't answer them, we'll pass them along to John. But we want to hear from you what you think about ArtShow. So again, John, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Take care, everyone.